Hi everyone. Welcome back to It's Me, Mika. In today's story, we're diving into something powerful and deeply emotional. It's titled Australia Expert Gave Up, USA Panic. A Filipino nurse saved the hospital. This isn't just about one hospital. It's about pressure, pride, and the quiet strength of a Filipino nurse who stepped up when others walked away. In a moment when even international experts felt overwhelmed, one unexpected hero reminded everyone what courage and compassion really looked like. If you believe in stories that highlight Filipino resilience, sacrifice, and heart, you're in the right place. I'm Mika, and this is a story you won't forget. Blinking out in an instant. But more than that, it's about what happens next. What happens when the people we call experts give up? When the systems we trust collapse? And when the only thing left is human ingenuity? Now, the specific hospital in this story, St. Michael's, is a fictional setting. The cyber attack, the Helios system, the Australian expert, they are elements of a story designed to illustrate a much deeper and very real truth. It's a story about the quiet, overlooked heroes who hold our world together, and how one of them, a nurse from the Philippines, refused to let the silence win. The catastrophe didn't start with a bang, but with a flicker, a barely there dimming of the lights in the ICU at the hospital they'll call St. Michael's. Then, a single, unified beat, as a dozen life support machines went from vibrant green to dead black. The digital heart of the hospital just stopped. In the chaos that followed, the one man flown in from Australia to prevent this very disaster, a world-renowned systems expert, delivered the verdict to the terrified hospital administration. It's gone. The core's been wiped. There's nothing to recover. His words were a death sentence for the hospital and for the hundreds of patients whose lives depended on its rhythm. Panic, cold, and fast began to spread. The system was called Helios. It was the pride of St. Michael's, a billion-dollar network that integrated everything from patient records and medication schedules to the ventilators in the ICU. It was sold as infallible, a fortress of data with backups for its backups. Dr. James Carter, the Australian expert, was one of its chief architects. He was a man who saw hospitals not as places of healing, but as complex data problems. He'd been flown in from Sydney just 2 days before, a preemptive strike to audit Helios after a minor glitch. Now, standing in a command center full of dead monitors, his face was pale. That minor glitch, it turned out, was a Trojan horse. A cyber attack had waited patiently, then executed a command that didn't just shut the system down, it irrevocably scrambled the core programming of the primary network and all its immediate backups. What do you mean? There's nothing, the hospital director, Harris, stammered. There has to be something. A cloud backup? Anything? Dr. Carter ran a hand through his hair. You don't get it, he said, his voice a mix of professional awe and horror. It didn't just delete the data. It rewrote it into garbage. Trying to restore from a backup would be like trying to rebuild a person from their shadow. The information is gone. We have no patient records, no medication schedules, no allergies, no diagnostic images. We are completely and utterly blind. His words hit the room like a physical blow. The head of nursing, Karen Wilson, was already on her phone, her voice cracking as she tried to relay the impossible news. Switch to manual charting, she barked. Manual everything. Get the crash carts ready. The panic seated in the command center quickly flowed out to the hospital floors. In the ICU, the silence was the most terrifying sound. The whoosh of ventilators was replaced by the frantic, manual pumping of ambu bags by residents. The reassuring beeps of heart monitors were gone, forcing nurses to press stethoscopes to chests. counting out beats against the frantic ticking of their own watches. It was a 50-year regression in 5 seconds. Doctors yelled for patient charts that no longer existed. A young doctor, panicked, almost gave a powerful blood thinner to a patient with a history of internal bleeding, a history now floating in the ether of a dead network. He was stopped only by a senior physician's gut feeling, but gut feelings weren't a sustainable longing for a hospital this size. Dr. Carter's verdict of hopelessness was becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. Amid the escalating bedlam, one person remained remarkably still. Her name was Carla Mendoza. A registered nurse in the ICU, she was a quiet, diligent presence. Her soft accent, a cadence from her native Philippines, often led others to mistake her quietness for timidity. They were wrong. Carla was one of the many Filipino nurses who are a critical backbone of the U.S. healthcare system. While Filipinos make up only about 1 to 2% of the U.S. population, they account for roughly 4% of all registered nurses in the country, and over a quarter of all foreign-born nurses. Like many, she'd come not just for the opportunity, but for the challenge. She trained at a large public hospital in Manila, a place of constant, managed chaos. Brownouts were common. Essential equipment broke down. There, she learned to rely not on machines, but on her hands, her eyes, and an intuition honed by 1,000 crises. She learned to be the machine when the machine failed. As her colleagues scrambled, Carla's mind was slowing down, filtering the noise. She saw a system so dependent on a single point of failure that its people had forgotten how to function without it. Their instincts had been outsourced to Helios, but her mind was also snagged on memory. A small detail from her orientation 2 years ago, a tour of the sub-basement. The guide, an old maintenance engineer, had pointed to a large, dusty metal cabinet in a forgotten corner. "That's the old nerve center," the engineer had chuckled. "From before Helios. It's an independent, hardwired analog relay. Connects directly to the backup generators. Can't run the whole hospital, but they kept it for, I don't know, a Black Swan event, I guess. It's a museum piece. Completely disconnected from the main network, of course. Completely disconnected from the main network." The phrase echoed in her mind. While the expert was mourning the death of the hospital's sophisticated brain, Carla was wondering if, just maybe, its primitive heart could still beat. She looked at the patient in bed 4, whose life depended on a ventilator now being powered by the straining arms of a first-year resident. His oxygen levels were dropping. There wasn't time. Carla found her supervisor, Karen, by the nurse's station. "Karen," Carla said, her voice steady. "I might have an idea." Karen looked up, her eyes fraught with stress. "Carla, not now. Just keep your patients breathing." "This is about keeping them breathing," Carla insisted. "There's an old system, an analog power relay in the sub-basement. It's not connected to the Helios network. It might be able to bring the essential life support circuits back online." Karen stared at her blankly. "An analog what?" "Carla, Dr. Carter, the man who built the system, said it's over." Just then, Dr. Carter himself strode back into the unit to oversee the managed decline. He overheard Carla's last sentence. A humorless, condescending smile touched his lips. "A physical system? Nurse, I assure you, if there were a big red switch to fix this, I'd have found it. There is no bypass." He spoke with the patronizing tone of a professor correcting a student. "I appreciate your initiative, but you're a nurse. You should focus on the patients. Leave the systems engineering to the experts." The dismissal was total. Carla felt a flash of anger, but she quenched it. Anger was a waste of energy. The patient in bed 4 was now turning a dusky shade of blue. She looked from Dr. Carter's arrogant face to Karen's overwhelmed one. Asking for permission was asking for a death sentence. With a quiet nod that looked like agreement, she turned and walked away. Not back to her patient, but to the stairwell door. She pushed it open and began to run. The descent into the hospital's underbelly was like going back in time. She found it in a dark corner, a massive gray metal cabinet covered in dust. A faded stencil read, "Emergency Power Relay, Analog Control." A series of heavy toggle switches and a huge lever were set to off. A diagram, yellowed and brittle, was bolted to the side. Carla wiped the dust away. The logic was simple. The system was designed to draw power directly from the backup diesel generators, which now sat idle, awaiting a digital command from Helios that would never come. This cabin was the mechanical command. The diagram showed a sequence. Get it wrong, and she could fry every piece of equipment it connected to. Her hands trembled as she reached for the first switch. There was no one to ask. Only her, a dusty diagram, and a fading hope of the patients upstairs. She took a breath, flipped the first switch. A heavy thunk echoed in the silent room. In the ICU, the situation was dire. The patient in bed 4 was in cardiac arrest. A doctor was doing chest compressions. Dr. Carter stood by, a grim monument to his own failure. Downstairs, Carla worked methodically. ICU circuit prime. Or circuit prime. ER circuit prime. Each switch responded with a solid, mechanical clack. She reached the final step. A large red lever painted with the word engage. What if he made things worse? She thought of the calm, resilient nurses she trained with in Manila, who could keep a dozen patients stable through a blackout with nothing but skill and grit. She was one of them. She gripped the lever and pulled with all her weight. It groaned, then stuck. She gritted her teeth and pulled harder. With a deafening crack, the lever slammed into the on position. For 3 long seconds, nothing. Then, a low hum started. Indicator lights on the cabinet flickered to light, glowing a steady green. The hum grew into a roar as the massive diesel generators outside coughed to life. Upstairs, the effect was instant. The ventilator on bed 4 sputtered and roared to life, its screen flashing on. The other ventilators followed, a chorus of life-giving sound. The central cardiac monitors blinked on, filling with heartbeats. A symphony of steady, rhythmic beeps replaced the chaotic shouting. Everyone froze. The doctor doing compressions stopped, staring at the monitor which now showed a steady heartbeat. The patient's oxygen levels began to climb. A few minutes later, Carla walked quietly back into the ICU, her scrubs smudged with dust. She didn't say a word. She just went to bed 4 and checked the ventilator settings. But Karen Wilson saw her, and she knew. She walked over to Carla, looked at the dust on her uniform, then at the steady green light on the ventilator. She opened her mouth, but instead just placed a hand on Carla's shoulder. Dr. Carter watched the silent exchange. The pieces clicked. The nurse, the one with the foolish idea. He walked over, his arrogance gone. "How?" he whispered. "How did you do that?" Carla looked up at him, tired but calm. "You were looking for a software solution," she said softly. "The problem was hardware. You just had to look in the basement." In the aftermath, a humbled Dr. Carter worked to integrate the analog system he'd dismissed into the hospital's permanent disaster protocols. The story of that day became a piece of hospital lore. The day the expert gave up, and the quiet Filipino nurse went into the basement and turned the lights back on. Carla Mendoza's story, while a fictional illustration, reflects a deeper reality. All across America, Hundreds of thousands of internationally educated nurses, particularly from the Philippines, form the invisible backbone of the healthcare system. Trained in environments where resourcefulness is a condition of survival, they bring a resilience and a depth of clinical skill that no algorithm can replicate. Yet their expertise is often overlooked. This story is a reminder that in a world mesmerized by technology, true strength often lies in the quiet competence of those on the ground. It's in the people who know where the old switches are, who trust their hands as much as the data, and who, when everyone else is panicking, have the courage to simply get the job done. It's a testament to the fact that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs.